Let's exercise some playoff demons, shall we? We discuss a whole bunch of playoff failure on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of our latest episodes. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we exercise some playoff demons to try to get them out of our system before a pivotal Game 6 in the opening round series between the Wild and the Stars. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as you can see, this is a visual podcast today because I did go out. Now, it's not the bundle of sage that you may be used to. We do actually legitimately have some sage sticks that I'm holding in front of me. No, I'm not on fire. But we're burning a little sage to try to exercise what has been just a whole heck of a lot of postseason demons for Minnesota sports teams in general, not just the Minnesota Wild, but pretty much every team that exists here in the state of Minnesota. And we know the numbers. We know all about the postseason failures for the Minnesota Wild. It's been a very long journey to get to this point for all of these Minnesota teams. The numbers, and actually it's ironic, since 1991, the Minnesota Wild have actually the best winning percentage of any of the core four sports teams here in Minnesota. The Wild, 34-61 in the playoffs since 1991. That's a .358 winning percentage. Minnesota Timberwolves 21-42. The Vikings 8-16 and the Twins 6-27. We know about the playoff failures in the first round. The Wild having not advanced out of the first round in their last 6 postseason runs. And so in order for this to potentially change, in order for us to advance beyond this demon, these monsters under the bed, as the everydayers heard me discuss in yesterday's show, for us to advance past these demons, we have to confront them head on. We have to confront them. We have to acknowledge their existence because that pulls the power away from them. That makes them so that their fear that they live on does not have power over us. And so we're going to talk about the multitude of different things that have led to the Wild being early playoff exits here on today's show, but there are positive examples for the Minnesota Wild to draw from. And let's go back to 2002-2003, one of the years in which the Minnesota Wild advanced to the Western Conference Finals. And 2 times in that postseason alone, the Minnesota Wild found themselves trailing not only 3-2, 3-1 in both series against the Colorado Avalanche and the Vancouver Canucks. The Wild found themselves trailing 3-1. And what did they do? Well, they rallied back and ended up winning in both instances against Colorado. After losing 3-2, 3-0, and 3-1, the Wild won the next 3 games by 3-2 scores. 3-2 in regulation, and then 3-2 in overtime twice. 2 straight games in which the Wild ended up winning 3-2 in overtime. And it all culminated with the goal heard round the world, Andrew Brunette getting the game winner for the Wild in Game 7 to advance them to round 2. A little different story against the Vancouver Canucks in that second round, but still similar, as the Wild found themselves trailing 3-1 to the Vancouver Canucks. And then what did the Wild do in the final 3 games of that series? They won 7-2, 5-1, and 4-2 to take that series and to go to the conference final. And, well, that's where the magic ended. That is where our first demon is going to be exercised here today. That is the demon of the hot goalie. And yes, that's what happened to the Wild when they got to the conference finals that season. They ran into the Anaheim Ducks, and in 4 games, they scored 1 goal. And so that is one of the things that we need to meet head on, is the hot postseason goalie. We'll conquer that fear here in this show today. But we want to go to the other instance in which the Wild found a multitude of a level of success beyond the first round. And the Wild in 2013-2014, they were able to get past the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the postseason. This again, an overtime game. This a series in which the Wild trailed 0-2 before winning 4 out of the next 5, including a 5-4 overtime win and another goal heard round the world. That, of course, being Nino Niederreiter scoring the game winner in overtime to send the Wild to the second round. And what happened in the second round of that postseason? You go up against the Chicago Blackhawks, not an instance of getting goalied per se, but running into a Chicago team that was very difficult to go up against. And so another demon to exercise here today is the demon of facing a rival in the postseason and being unable to get past them to the next step in the journey. So we have a few demons to exercise here today, but to start the show, we want to show you it is possible. First round playoff series wins are possible. But in order to get to that point, you have to confront those demons. So we'll do that. We'll start with being goalied. We will exercise the being goalied demon as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all of the sugar and calories? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. Built. You got to try this. If you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices but you don't want to compromise on taste, I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously. These taste so amazing, you're going to think that it's impossible that they're good for you, but I promise you they are. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They also come in some unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. But like I said, they are healthy. These bars contain only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And best of all, you no longer need to wait for your online order to arrive at your door. You can head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up a box today. Get your Built Bar snacking immediately underway. If you don't have a Walmart or Sam's Club nearby, don't worry. You can still head to Built.com and order a box today, but whichever way you choose, make sure you choose Built Bar. Continuing today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure for the everydayers that you tune in tomorrow. We have a special guest joining the show, the radio voice of the Minnesota Wild, Joe O'Donnell, joins us to get us closer to puck drop in Game 6. So make sure that you tune in for that for tomorrow's episode right here on Locked On Wild. All right. And again, this is a very visual episode because those that are watching on YouTube see that I do indeed have sage sticks that are burning in front of me. And we are periodically trying to cleanse the screen of the demons of Wild postseason failures past. And the first one that we're going to start with is being goalied. We saw it in 02-03. Jean-Sebastien Giguere gets the series win in the conference finals, giving up 1 goal. You may recall as recently as 2016, 2017, series in which the Minnesota Wild were one of the best teams in the postseason that year. And what happened? They got goalied. The Wild ran into a Blues team that did not have a ton going their way, other than really the only thing that you needed, which was Jake Allen, who was just unreal in that series. The Blues won the first 3 games of that series, giving up a total of 3 goals. The Wild did get Game 4, in which their goalie, Devin Dubnyk, came up with a shutout. And then the Blues won in overtime in Game 5 to eliminate the Minnesota Wild in 2016-2017. We have, in fact, also seen a couple of recent goalieing performances. Think back to the Vegas Golden Knights 2 years ago. Marc-Andre Fleury ended up playing against the Minnesota Wild in that series. And what did Fleury do? Well, he came out on the wrong end of the first game of the series, which was a 1-0 goalie duel. And the Golden Knights won 3-1, 5-2, 4-0. The Wild were able to take the next 2 games, and then the Golden Knights won in Game 7 by a score of 6-2. Marc-Andre Fleury with some great work in that series for Vegas. But don't forget, the Golden Knights had plenty go right for them in that series, and the Wild ended up coming up short there because Jonas Brodin got hurt in Game 7. But we'll still throw it in the category of being goalied. Now, why do we bring that up here today? Well, because, yes, Jake Oettinger has had a couple of stellar performances so far here in this postseason, but it's not as though the Wild have found themselves on the wrong end of every single game in this series. And so I refuse, in fact, to consider this being goalied. And so we are going to exercise right now. We're going to exercise the notion of being goalied in this series because Jake Oettinger, a couple of good games, but by and large, his goalie play has not completely shut down the Minnesota Wild. And so say we here on this episode of Locked On Wild, the Wild will not be goalied the rest of the series. That demon has been conquered here today. Now, the next one in the string of demons to get to is the rival team, the divisional opponent in which the Wild just are not able to move past. And so we will talk more about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Every dayers, make sure, again, that you tune in tomorrow as we discuss Game 6 with Wild radio voice Joe O'Donnell. Looking forward to releasing that one for you a little later tomorrow to get you set for a late puck drop in a pivotal Game 6 for the Minnesota Wild. So we're continuing to exercise the playoff demons, to meet them head on where they live, under the bed in those dark places we don't talk about. Bring them out into the open and cleanse them. The Minnesota Wild have had no shortage of familiar faces that they have had to deal with over their postseason futility. The Chicago Blackhawks, one of the most common teams that the Wild have had to contend with over their postseason runs. But the Chicago Blackhawks are not a team in which the Wild have to concern themselves with at this point in the postseason because, well, Chicago has not gotten there. The Wild have seen the St. Louis Blues a time or two, 2016, 2017, and last year. The Wild have had trouble getting past them, but that is not a team that the Wild need to concern themselves with in this postseason. And so it brings us to the opponent this round in the postseason, that, of course, being the Dallas Stars. The Minnesota Wild, familiar with the Stars. It wasn't that long ago that these two teams matched up last in the postseason. It was 2015, 2016, in fact. And the Wild ended up losing that series in 6 games. And for the Wild, it was, for the most part, an inability to consistently score goals. And goalie play was a struggle at points as well. That was Devin Dubnyk. That was the goalie that year for the Minnesota Wild. Also did not have the luxury of a step-up performer. Had a lot of complementary parts that were solid, but not the luxury of the step-up and take over the game performer that we have seen recently. And so we can cleanse those demons of postseasons past off the ledger, because this year the Dallas Stars are not going to prevent the Minnesota Wild from what they hope to accomplish like other teams previously have, like the Blackhawks, like the Blues, like the Avalanche, like Winnipeg. The Wild are going to get their retribution here this postseason, because the Wild do have a step up and take charge superstar. They have solid complementary players. They have the ability to have players step up and take over games to will them to wins. We have not seen it yet, but again, the demon of defense dominating the superstars, we are exercising that demon as well. And so those failures, those demons, do not hold power over the Wild in the rest of this series. The other demon to exercise is the demon of special teams failures. We've seen it a ton here in this postseason. We saw it last year. We've seen it in years previous. The details, face-offs, power play, penalty kill. Those demons are the toughest to conquer. And so they are the ones that we save for last. But they are most important because for the Minnesota Wild to get back into this series and to come away with a win in Game 6 and then a win in Game 7, they will need to shore up the penalty kill. They will need to get to work on the power play. And so we hereby take away the power of the demon of special teams failure. We take the power away, their ability to prevent the Wild from killing penalties and from scoring. We take that power away, as we do with the ability to cash in on breakaways and odd man rushes. You have no power here forward over the Minnesota Wild in this series. Because that is another thing, as we've talked about, as the everydayers have heard on this show, that is another thing that we need the Wild to be able to contribute in the way of odd man rushes, breakaways, those types of opportunities. And so the demon of finishing is also hereby vanquished. And the final hurdle that we need to discuss, we need to officially vanquish here on today's show, the demon of first round exits. This demon has been prevalent for the last 7 postseasons. Doesn't matter if the Wild are the higher seed. Doesn't matter if they're the lower seed. Doesn't matter if they look better on paper, if they match up better, if they have a great scoring team, if they have a good defensive team. The demon of first round exits always finds a way to exert its wrath on the Minnesota Wild. No more. So we say here today, the demon of first round exits has officially been vanquished. You have no power over the Minnesota Wild for the remainder of this series. And so that is about all that I can do to get the Wild back into this series in Game 6 and to send them to a Game 7. Ladies and gentlemen, we saved the sage for the time of most dire need for the Minnesota Wild, and I tell you that time is right now. And so we have cleansed the state of Minnesota. We have cleansed the XL Energy Center. Evil spirits, be warned. Those who enter here will not find the usual lack of resistance that they have seen in years past. This Minnesota Wild team, empowered now by the hockey gods, empowered by those who have made it past the first round, 2002, 2003, 2013, 2014. The Wild are empowered by those who have advanced past this point to help this team get to that second round and to continue their postseason run. And so, feeling satisfied that the demons have been vanquished, we will turn our attention to more logical and more practical Game 6 takeaways in our preview episode for tomorrow, but trying to lighten it up a little bit before Game 6. So that's where you bust out the sage. That will do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Thank you for tuning in as always and making Locked on Wild both your first listen of the day and the everydayers for coming back once again to tune into today's show. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already and on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes. Plenty of Sage Sticks left, and so I may end up going back to these if we need them as this series unfolds. But continue to tune in as we gear you up for Game 6 and beyond with pregame content plus postgame plus full episodes, all here Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.